morning and welcome into Duval Rundown episode 108. Mia O'Brien sitting in for the vacation and Gus Logue, joined by someone who we haven't heard from on this podcast in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, Frangie, the voice of your Jacksonville Jaguars. Frank, thanks so much for making some time this morning, especially ahead of what's going to be a busy day in Duval County with the pre-draft media availability between James Gladstone and Liam Coen down at the Miller Electric Center. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm proud to be number 108, Mia. I didn't know I was number 108, so I'm very proud of that. And I'm doing great, and I'm excited about draft season like everybody else is.
Hey, we've been trying to do a podcast, you and me. People don't know that. We've been trying to at least get an episode out there, workshopping ideas. So if you do have ideas, this is a live podcast recording. So leave them in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube or Twitter, my personal Twitter, wherever you're watching from. Leave a comment, leave a share, whatever you want to do on this fine Tuesday morning. But let's dive right into it, Frank. You've had the opportunity over the last few months to get to know Liam Coen since he was hired in late January, James Gladstone since he was hired in late February. But there's another guy in that trifecta who you've known for the better part of 30 years, and that is the executive vice president of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tony Boselli. So as we look at this triumvirate, looking ahead to their first NFL draft here in just a few days' time, I'm curious, how have you seen this role from what Shad Khan hired Tony Boselli to do in late January, early February, to where we are now and what his role has become at the Miller Electric Center and Everbank Stadium?
You know, Mia, I think there's two chapters to that book. All right. Number one, and you're right, I've known Tony forever. We've done radio together, just he and I, for a time. We've been in the booth together. He's one of my dearest friends, and we're very close. So I'm going to be biased in anything I say about Tony because he's my buddy. I think he's very good. But I think there's two chapters to that book. Number one, the job description. His job is to manage everything football other than going and getting players and coaching the players. Liam Coen's in charge of coaching and developing the players. James Gladstone's in charge of identifying the players and hiring the scouting staff and drafting and signing the players. Tony's in charge of everything else football related, from nutrition to travel to operations to equipment to strength training, the whole football outlook. So Trent Baalke, the GM, was over all that stuff. That was too much. So Tony manages all the football operations other than going and getting the players and coaching the players. And that's his job. That's executive vice president of football, is everything but those two things. So that's chapter one. That's the job description. But Mia is more than that. His spirit is infiltrated the whole entire operation. And I think the fact that Liam and James have similar spirits is why they work together. That alignment stuff is real. Tony's passion, his intelligence, his savvy when it comes to winning, whether he was winning in private business before he got this job, whether he was winning as a left tackle, one of the best to ever play, and now winning here. I think that competitive spirit, that doing things the right way, I think the moral compass, the toughness, all that spirit has kind of worked its way into the operation. So there's two chapters. A, what's his job? And B, his purpose, who he is, making its way. And I think he's done a great job already. He's so excited. Every time I'm around Tony a lot, every time you see him, every time you talk to him, he can't wait to get up in the morning. He can't wait to go to work. And I think you're going to see that throughout the Jaguar building and throughout their operation. I really do.
We do want to make a note, while things are still being finalized on the broadcast front, Tony Boselli, we can confirm, we can report, Frank, Tony Boselli will not be a part, unfortunately, of the radio booth because he has such a pivotal role in the organization here in the 2025 season.
Yeah, we'll miss him, but he won't be part of our broadcast team. We're going to drag him in pregame some. I can promise you that. We're going to drag him into our pre-draft show next Thursday. We've already decided that, but yeah, we'll move forward without Tony, and he did a great job. Tony, Jeff, and I in the booth, we had a blast, and so we won't have Tony in our booth anymore. But he's got more important fish to fry, as it were, for sure.
And of course, by we say important fish to fry, we're referring to the EVP podcast with John Osher. Obviously, that's what we're referring to. That's his number one responsibility. And that's, of course, paramount to the nutrition, the equipment, the overseeing PR, marketing, all that other stuff that Tony will certainly have a hand in moving forward. You referenced the spirit, though, this idea of alignment, a mindset between Tony Boselli, what he has believed, what he has learned during all his years here in Jacksonville, coupled with the spirit of Liam Coen and James Gladstone. I don't want to have you speak out of turn for Tony, but I'm just curious, that spirit, can you articulate it into words as one of the outsiders, not one of those three individuals, of what this team is trying to articulate through the draft, through the roster construction, and through what it puts out on the grass?
Well, there's two different questions there as we unpack that, Mia. Number one is the spirit of who they are. I've had a chance to be around them socially the last 2 or 3 weeks at various events. I've gotten to know Liam a little bit, getting to know James not quite as well. I've had him on the show. But I think the spirit of who they are, let's start with that. And that is they are so enthusiastic. This is their first crack at it now. James Gladstone's first crack at a GM, but you can see he's been ready for a while. Liam Coen, same thing. First crack as a head coach, but he's been ready for a while. And I think that enthusiasm is part of that spirit that Tony Boselli brings. In addition to that, all three are really bright guys. So you have three really smart people, young in their job. Tony's older than the other two, but he's young in this job, and he's a young 53 or whatever he is. So you have young people in their job, young enthusiasm, who are extremely bright. And I think that's what they bring to that's the spirit of it. As for how they build the team, that comes down to what they saw they were getting. Tony had a better feel because he was around it as a broadcaster for many years. What they're getting is I think they felt like they had to do some rebuilding. I think they've got to build the line of scrimmage. They've been very outspoken about that, very clear about that. They signed 10 free agents, as you know, Mia. 4 were offensive linemen. I mean, that's 40% of your free agents are going to play one of those 5 spots. So I think they've got to build the trenches. I think that's first and foremost. I can tell you, sitting next to Tony Boselli for 11 years in a broadcast booth, sitting with him countless other times at dinners and lunch and golf and all the other stuff, one of the things that drove him crazy is the team wasn't physical enough. They weren't winning the battle at the line of scrimmage, and it drove him nuts. I can tell you that. We've had that conversation. He said it. I'm not telling you anything people don't know. He said it publicly a bunch of times. So when I think they want to, James Gladstone talks about raising the floor. That means your overall roster is better. That means your backups are better. That means your 53 are better. But then you also have to go find your stars. And I think my question now will be, and the interest I have is, they've started to build that foundation. They'll continue to build the foundation. Can they go find stars? Trevor Lawrence is going to be a star. He's getting into his prime years, I believe. Brian Thomas Jr. is a star. I think both pass rushers are stars. I think Tyson Campbell can be a star. You got to go find stars, though, Mia. And I'll be interested to see if we see some of that when they draft on a week from Thursday.
And that's what's most interesting, Frank, knowing what big picture the perception is of this draft class, that it's got a ton of capable starters, but maybe not blue chip talent. And that's where I'm really curious how James Gladstone approaches this draft, because you could make the argument, and more than one person around the league has said it to me, perhaps, yes, you want to acquire more darts to throw at the proverbial dartboard, to be clear. And I think James has been very open about that. He said it on NFL Daily with our friends Greg Rosenthal and Jordan Rodriguez, that he would love to trade back. He would love to have more throws, more shots at finding quality starters. But in doing so, I think you would move yourself back to that second, third, fourth, fifth rounds, which is where the bulk and the meat and the potatoes of this class is, as has been discussed by national draft pundits everywhere. And that's why, to your point, that's where I believe that there needs to be a perception, or maybe there is a misconceived perception of, this is not a 1 year, hey, we're going to throw this thing into high gear. The Jaguars believe they can be competitive in 2025. It's not going to be a finished product 1 year ago from today.
Yeah, I agree with that. But yes, I agree. You're going to build. It's not going to be done overnight. Having said, and they've already shown that by signing 10 free agents, and they've got 10 draft picks at the very least. But they have some players ready to have good years, and your quarterback's going into his 5th year. Mia, we've all said this. Quarterbacks around the league are their best years 5 through 9, 5 through 10. After that, they tend to get old. Brady and Manning didn't get old, but most of them tend to get old. Before that, they don't really know the league. It's years 5 through 10 where most quarterbacks are at their prime. It really is. And Trevor's getting ready to enter year 5. He now understands the league. He understands how fast the cornerbacks are. He understands if that ball's not out in X seconds, you're going to get sacked. I think you can hear that all you want, but you got to live it. And Trevor's lived it enough now, so I think he's ready. I think the receiver's ready. I like their backfield. So if they can build those lines of scrimmage, they might be better in 25 than people think. But to your point, yeah, you're building a big thing. As far as trading back, my opinion, I think it's going to be very hard to trade back out of 5 because there's not enough people to go get. To go up to 5, you got to have somebody you really like. Well, Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, and Travis Hunter, that kind of players. I don't know that there's another player in the draft that someone would really mortgage some future to go get. That's my opinion. I think after those three players, the draft leans out a bunch. Now it's a good first round, but I don't know that there's not another core. I used to think Shedeur Sanders was going in that top 4, and he still might, but I'm not convinced anymore. I don't know if it's the interviews, the people seeing him work. His arm is way more Brock Purdy than it is Patrick Mahomes.
Which is not a knock, it's to be clear. But again, it goes back to that point of it's not blue chip talent. And I would put the argument out there that Cam Ward is not necessarily a blue chip player. And so that's where you've got 2 at the top, and then you've got solid starters, as opposed to, like you said, pillars. And to be clear, you could take, especially, and we'll get into Liam Coen and his coaching philosophy, especially if you believe in the coaching and the development that you've brought into your building.
Yeah, I disagree a little bit on Cam. I think Cam Ward's pretty good. I think he's, but overall, we're saying the same thing. After a handful of guys, it's not superstar players. But back to the Jags. Let's not overthink this. They need a defensive tackle. They need a receiver. They need a cover corner. That's probably the first 3 spots. Now, that doesn't mean that's who they're going to pick in their first 3 picks, but we know that. The reason everybody is mocking Mason Graham is that's a clear need, and he's a guy that measures up as a top 5, 6, 7 draft pick, and that's a clear need for them, and they draft 5th. So I think that's why they've got to find that. One thing they do have to do, look, they like Mason Smith. They think they may have something there. They like Jordan Jefferson. They think they may have something there. Everyone still holds out hope that Devon Hamilton can refine that magic he had 2 or 3 years ago before the illness. Hopefully there's something left with Eric Armstead. But let's be honest, that's a spot they've got to address. That's the one spot they didn't address in free agency. So they've got to address that spot. Secondly, they've probably got to go find another corner. We know that now. Obviously, Jordan Lewis is a very good player, but he does seem to be more of a slot corner, which is what Jarian Jones is. Now, one of those guys is going to get a shot outside. But looking at the model, it looks like they've got to do that. And I think they need one more other game-changing receiver. So, in my opinion, those are the 3 spots right? Now, they're going to draft offensive linemen. They're going to draft another linebacker. They're going to draft some speed. But I think in my opinion, there's 3 spots they've got to address. I wouldn't overthink it. I wouldn't be shocked if that's their first 3 picks.
Keep the comments coming on YouTube and on X and Twitter as well. Let's dive into a little bit more about the character, the person you've gotten to know, Frank, when it comes to Liam Coen, and then we'll pivot to James Gladstone. Do keep those comments coming, though, folks, because some great questions for Frank on the Mason Smith front, on the corner front, and we'll circle back to that. But first, Liam Coen, getting to know him over the last 2-3 months. What are the Jacksonville Jaguars getting? What are they being led by moving into the future with him at the helm?
Real regular guy. Doesn't take himself too seriously, but takes his job very seriously. I think that's the perfect professional me in any job. I don't care if you're a banker, insurance, or you're in our business, you're a coach. Take your job very seriously and understand the urgency of it, but don't take yourself too seriously. Liam's a fun-loving guy. He's a laid-back guy. I've seen him socially a bunch now. And we haven't seen him as a coach yet because he hasn't done it yet. I think he's the right guy. I think he's a regular guy. When you walk outside, you want your next door neighbor to be a regular guy, right? You want to talk about sports or the stock market or what your families are doing. You want it to be a regular guy. I think Liam's that guy. That's been my first take. Now, he's got a little edge to him, which you need too. But I think he's that guy. I think he's smart as heck, man. I think he's a smart dude. The one thing they're getting, those 3 cats are 3 smart guys. So I think you're getting a smart guy. Obviously, a very analytical mind. That's what all today's young coaches are in every sport, right? I think you're getting that. But I think you're getting a regular guy. I think he will connect with today's player. I think today's coach has to connect with today's player, and I think Liam will really do that. Baker Mayfield raves about the guy. Will Levis raves about the guy. Mark Stoops, who I know well, raves about the guy. So I think he's going to connect. I think he's a regular guy who will connect and is a very bright guy. That's my kind of overview of Liam, getting to know him so far.
I liked this one. I didn't get to it earlier from Rateus on the YouTube chat. Open up my eager eyes. They are all bright guys, as Frank Frangie alluded to. Well said, Rateus. Well said. Have we gotten a handicap on Liam Coen's golf game? Is he going to be winning any scratch tournaments with Andrew Wingard in the next few months?
I haven't played with him, and I haven't seen him on the golf front. I saw him at the Boselli Foundation golf event on Sunday night. We had the dinner Sunday night and then the golf on Monday. He was at the dinner Sunday night. I did not see him at the golf. I think he's working. Okay, he's got a job on Monday, so I think he had too much to do to be playing golf on Monday. But I did see him at the dinner on Sunday night. So I hear he's about a single-digit handicap.
Okay.
I don't think he's a 4 handicap like Doug Peterson was, but I don't think he's a 20 handicap like some coaches are. I think he's probably a 7 or 8 handicap, and when he finally gets a chance to play, I do know we were talking the other day. When all of it gets, coaches don't get much time off. But when they do get time off, that little bit of June, I think he's going to Scotland to play. I think that's his plan. I think he's going with family members to go play in Scotland and then spend some time back in Newport, Rhode Island, which is his home. I think he's going to kind of combine those. But he's so I think he's a single-digit handicapper, but I don't know all the specific details.
I love it. Well, speaking of Doug Peterson, who also made a pilgrimage, if you may, to the home of golf last summer, I think that, and I don't want to, exhaust the point because Doug Peterson has moved on. The Jacksonville Jaguars have moved on. You obviously, have a great rapport with Doug. I believe I had a great rapport with Doug. I would like to believe I still do. I want to philosophically dissect, though, your point about Liam Coen, this younger voice relating to the modern player. I think that, and I've certainly emphasized this point on the air on 1010XL here on Duval Rundown, and I know you have as well, Frank. It's not to say that Doug Peterson is not a great head coach. It's just to say that the situation evolved, and for this group of players at this point in their career, perhaps Liam Coen and a younger voice and a younger staff might be the best way to get the most out of those players. What would you make of that statement?
Yeah, I think that there's some conventional thinking, Mia, that's what people think. And look, we all have our opinions, and I'm biased because Doug's a friend, and I stay in touch with Doug. Doug was in town a week and a half ago or so. We spent a little time together. We had lunch. I like Doug Peterson. I don't know that I sensed that Doug wasn't connecting with the guys. That wasn't my sense. My sense was the roster really struggled. As Trevor Lawrence said in his postseason press conference after Doug Peterson was fired, they couldn't run the ball at all. That makes you predictable. I thought lack of personnel in the trenches and maybe some defensive play calling that allowed balls to go over the top too much were bigger problems than a coach not connecting with the players. So I didn't see that as a problem. Now, again, that's my bias, and Doug's a good friend, and maybe I'm being jaded, but I didn't see that as a problem. I thought Doug connected fine with the players. But to the point, once Doug's gone, let's make sure you get a guy that you absolutely know will also really connect with the players. A little bit younger, a little bit closer to their age, a little bit more of the analytical thinking, which is what today's guys all do. They love the analytics. Liam Coen is more of that than a lot of the old school coaches, including Doug Peterson. So I thought Doug connected okay with them. I think Liam's going to connect okay with them. I think Liam's going to have a very good relationship with his players. I like this guy, man. I really like Liam Coen. I like who he is. Every time you're around him, he's one of those guys that you're laughing and joking and telling stories, and he's that kind of guy. So I think that guy will connect with players. I'll tell you a story, and I told Liam this story on the air when we were in Indianapolis. You were there because we were all doing it together. I saw Josh Hines-Allen. Right before we went to the combine. I spent about 20 minutes with Josh. I know you know Josh as well. And Josh went on and on about Liam the man. He had talked to Mark Stoops about him because they're both Kentucky guys. And he said of all the people he'd been around, he was amazed at how much Liam already connected with him. Not as a football player, but asking about his family, asking about his children, asking about his life here in Jacksonville, what it's like here in Jacksonville. And Josh had a look in his eyes when he told me that story about how he connected with Liam. So I told Liam that story when we were all at the combine together. And Liam kind of confirmed it. He said, yeah, we've had some really good visits, long visits, only 2-hour visits, just the two of them. And I think that's the kind of thing that will really resonate with players. That doesn't mean past coaches didn't have that. I don't believe that. But I do believe Liam does have that. And I think there's a connection. Again, I looked into Josh's eyes when he told me that story, Mia. And then I looked into Liam's eyes when I repeated it to him. And you could see that. And that's just one player. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that's going to happen with a lot of the players.
A blue chip talent pillar player, though, or what you hope to be for this organization.
Yeah, so I thought it was a good story. And I think it speaks to the connection that I think he's going to have with his guys.
Anecdotally, I will also share with you all that when we spoke with Liam Coen on 1010XL, Frank and Hayes, after his introductory press conference, and I've shared this with other people, Liam walks out onto the deck at the Miller Electric Center, and I think he wanted to talk to you, me, and Hayes for like 25 minutes, and the PR staff was like, we got to keep it moving, dude. And like that for me, validated and clarified everything that I had heard about Liam. Of this is a guy who just wants to get to know you. And so now segueing to James Gladstone, that is certainly a sticking point when it comes to the general manager position, not just here in Jacksonville, Frank, but I think nationally across the National Football League. And I've shared this with other friends around the league. I compare it to, and this is me nerding out a little bit, so please indulge me for a second. I compare it to the president of a college. You expect that person to be an extrovert because at the end of the day, their number one job is to be a fundraiser. My experience at my alma mater, Ithaca College, was that our president was an introvert. He had to put on that extroverted hat when he had to go out there and be the president of IC. And I think you can make the same argument for Trent Baalke. Maybe not other general managers around the NFL. Certainly, I don't think James Gladstone, but that's just the reality of the situation. It's a very different ball game, at least from my interactions with him, with James Gladstone, who is different than Dave Caldwell. He's different than Shaq Harris. He's different than Gene Smith. Go right on down the line. I would even make the argument he might be even different compared to his mentor in Les Snead. There's certainly some crossover there, but he's certainly a unique cat. And I think it's going to be much more about that personal relationship compared to regimes of the past.
You know, I agree with that. Let me unpack a lot of it. I don't know Les Snead. I know Trent, but I never got to know Trent socially very well. And I think your read on him is correct. He probably is an introvert. That doesn't mean he's a bad guy.
Right. And I want to be clear, like introverts are not bad people just because I'm an extrovert. But it's just the reality of like my favorite mentor of all time, my scholarship director, is an introvert, but he would recognize, hey, I need to put the extrovert hat on here to have success.
No, I agree. But I didn't know Trent as well. But I think your read on James Gladstone is correct. I told you I was with him socially within the last week. And when I notice people, it's not just, by now I've gotten to know him a little bit, but I watch how they connect with others. I watched how, when I introduced James to my wife, he hadn't met my wife, and I watched how he connected with Suzanne. And that's a big deal to how someone treats your wife. You know what I mean? And I watched how he connected with Suzanne and watched them talk for 4 or 5 minutes. Then I watched it, which was very cool. I watched how respectful he was. Anytime he met somebody new, he was there with his wife. And it was a social event. But I watched a lot of that. And I think he is going to be an extrovert. I think he's so intelligent that he uses all the smart words. And that seems to be the identification. That's how people ID him. They talk about ecosystems and all the words he used.
Intangibly rich.
But beyond, right, exactly. But beyond that, he's a neat guy. So yeah, I'm going on and on about it. Listen, I'm always the glasses half full guy. Everybody knows me. I'm that guy. But I like where they are. I like the three guys. I like the way they work together. I think the alignment's real, and I can't wait to see what they come up with.
Let's get to a handful of questions. Frank, you did bring up the idea of, hey, maybe Mason Smith is thought of highly, or at the very least in a positive light, after being a second-round pick of Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson by this new regime. Brian and a couple others have responded on YouTube and asked, Brian specifically notes that he would be developing Mason Smith in the offseason, but because there's an investment in Mason Smith, he would look to offensive line with that number 5 overall pick. What say you? Because he also notes that there's a certain Florida Gator he has his eye on in, I don't know how realistic this is. I think Cam Jackson, Brian, might be the more realistic Gator compared to Des Watson, maybe on day 3 as a selection for the Jaguars along the defensive front.
First of all, Mason Smith.
A lot to unpack there.
Right. Mason Smith is very good when he's good. What the key with young players is get them to be their best every play. And that doesn't mean he didn't take plays off. That means, young players, Mia, they got to make sure they're in the right gap. They got to make sure they're lined up right. How many times do you see a linebacker go up and tap a young defensive lineman on the rear to tell him he's in the wrong gap or he's lined up wrong? Well, the more you play, the more you work through that. I think Mason Smith's going to be pretty good now. He's a talented guy. We'll see if he's everything they want him to be, but we'll see if he's that guy. Jordan Jefferson's more likely to line up in the right spot more often, but he's not nearly as talented. But I think there's something there with Mason Smith. I really do. I think they would tell you they think they can get something out of these young, Tyler Lacey too, these young defensive linemen. I think they can get something out. That's what they think. I think they would tell you they think they get. That doesn't mean they're not going to draft them. They can get something out of it. I've thought about offensive line at number 5. It would surprise me. Now, let me be clear. That's not any insight. That's not wink, wink. Tony, James, Liam, or anybody are telling me anything. I don't want to misrepresent that. That's just my take. I'll say that, and they'll wind up with Will Campbell, and I'll be the biggest dummy in the room. But I don't think so. I don't think they're going to do that. I think I think we've overthought this a little bit. I think if Mason Graham's there and Travis Hunter doesn't drop, they're going to take Mason Graham. That's what I think. And then they'll get some other guys. As for the Gator guys, I don't know if Big Dez is going to be a good pro. Everybody loves Big Dez.
There is a lot of, that's why I brought Cam Jackson up. There's a lot of love for Cam Jackson in the street. Friend of 1010XL, Trevor Sycamore, is banging the drum for him.
Yeah.
I should know Trevor is a Gator grad as well.
Yeah, but Cam Jackson's going to be a heck of a player. Whoever gets it, he's going to climb up. You watch him. I don't know where he's mocked, but he's going to go higher than wherever he's mocked today. He's a heck of a. He's big. He's 6'6". He's a heck of a player. Though I think I'd love to see the Jags land him. I just think by the time he's not as good as Mason Graham and he's not as ready as Mason Graham, and by the time they draft again, I doubt he'll be there.
From Duval TV, I would rather draft Ashton Genty over Mason Graham. What say you, Frank?
Yeah, Ashton Genty's a good player. I mean, he's a really good player. I mean, and the running back has kind of come back to the NFL. Saquon Barkley kind of brought the running back. And so all of a sudden, for the longest years I'm old, Nia. I'm older than you young folks. Back in the day, the running backs meant everything. And then they went away, and then nobody cared. And running backs were a dime a dozen. Well, they're starting to come back. And Ashton Genty's a really good player, so I could live with it. I just think they've got two pretty good backs, and I don't know that they've got a nose guard. If Devon Hamilton can come back, he's that. But I don't know that they have that now, and I think he plugs in and plays right away. But I get it. I could live with Ashton Genty all day long because I think he's a really, really good player. I just don't know that's the spot I would take.
I think you've convinced the chat, Frank, because now they're saying Mason Smith and Mason Graham can be Stroud and Henderson 2.0, a callback to the early 2000s Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, those two guys were pretty good now. Okay, so and remember, those two guys were both really big. Mason Graham's not big. He's more Aaron Donald, small, quick, find his way, play lower than the offensive lineman kind of guy. So he's a little different. Stroud and Henderson were both 6'6", 6'7", gigantic guys, which is what I think Mason Smith will be. But yeah, I can see the two Masons playing in there together for a long time. I really could see that.
One more from me personally, Frank. I want to circle back to something you said earlier, and then we'll wrap. The cornerback position. They go out, they sign Jordan Lewis to, at the time, the most lucrative deal for a nickel corner in NFL history. The idea, and you noted it, of Jordan Lewis and second-year, former third-round pick Jarian Jones out of Florida State will have a chance to compete for that spot opposite Tyson Campbell. I go back to, and again, not saying that what Les Snead and the Rams have done, certainly James Gladstone was at the head of their scouting department, not saying that that's indicative of what the strategy and what the approach will be at the NFL draft next weekend, but that is a Rams secondary that the highest drafted player was Cam Kitchens out of Miami last year, and he was the final pick of the third round. And so that's ultimately where I'm curious your take on where they will prioritize a cornerback opposite Tyson Campbell in this year's draft. Obviously, I know what they're going to tell us at the pre-draft availability later today if the question was to be asked, which is we'll see how the board falls to us. But I'm curious how much of a priority you believe that will be.
A lot of answers to that one. I give you a lot of long-winded answers.
It's the last question, so take it however you would like.
But a lot of answers to that, at least for me, Mia. Number one, I'm not sure what Anthony Campanile is going to do. I don't think he can just say, well, Green Bay did this, so this is what the Jags are going to do. It's not that simple. He's got some ideas on how he wants to run this defense, and they're very careful not to show their hand. Why would they, right? So I'm not sure what he's going to do. Is it going to be a lot of man? Is it going to be a lot of zone? Is it going to be a lot of, if you're playing zone, your cornerbacks are watching the quarterback, which means you don't have to necessarily have the turn and run skills that if you're playing a lot of man that you've got to have. So I'm not completely sure what they're going to do. They like Jordan Lewis. Let me tell you this. Here's what I do know. They think he's a really good player. Now, does that mean he's got to be inside just because he's played inside? I don't know. I think both Jordan Lewis and Jarian Jones are going to get a look at both spots. In a perfect world, that's your three starters are Jarian Jones, Jordan Lewis, and Tyson Campbell versus a rookie starting out there. Well, if you do that, then one of those two guys that we have identified as slot corners have to play outside. But again, that outside means something different if you're gonna play more zone. And I don't know what they're gonna do. So to your question, you still have to have another elite cover corner. I can tell you, if Travis Hunter drops, my guess is they will sprint that card to the podium. All right. So, but he's not.
Moonwalk or doing the worm is what I'm now using. Sprint is overused. Now we're moonwalking or we're doing the worm, Frank.
How about dive head first? Like
there you go.
I think is what they will do. But he's not going to drop. I think, in my opinion, he's the best player in the draft. I think he's better than the quarterback. I think he's better than Abdul Carter. I think he's the best player in the draft. And I can tell you the teams that have interviewed him, not just the Jags, he loves football. He loves ball. He's the first guy there. He's the last guy to leave. He would be the most sought after guy in this draft if the need for quarterbacks wasn't what it was. That's how good a player he is. So he's not going to drop. But so back to your question. I'm not sure what they're going to do defensively. They've got to find another elite corner. I don't think it's going to be at 5. It could be at 36. My guess will be after their first 2 picks.
We've gotten submissions for teleport, moonsault, combining somersault and moonwalking. So yeah. So we've got some submissions of, heaven forbid, I don't want to call it the doomsday scenario. It's if pigs were to fly, if Travis Hunter was to fall to 5. Frank, any last thoughts as we get ready? Oh, go ahead.
Baseball guys like me and just dive head first. No one knows. Am I just so old that there's no baseball on like your answers, your comments there?
I'm trying to look. Do I even have anything baseball? Here you go. We've got Field of Dreams. We got a little baseball around. The kids still talk a little baseball in these parts. So, but Frank, we appreciate you hopping on with us. And of course, the Jaguars pre-draft availability with Liam Coen and James Gladstone coming up this afternoon. Any final thoughts from you, Frank, as we get ready for that one?
No, I'm excited about the draft, man. I think today they've got to be guarded. I think what my experience in all these pre-draft luncheons have been is they talk more about what they think about all the players. What do you think about this guy? What is he good at? And you over the years, whether it's Trent, whether it's Dave Caldwell, whoever it's been, they've been pretty transparent about what they think of the player. Now, they're not transparent about whether or not they think they might take him, but when you ask them about a specific player, so I think they'll tell you a little bit about is the draft heavy with defensive tackles and not so much wide receivers, which is, by the way, I think the case. I think they'll go through all that. But I'm excited. I'm excited about where they are. I'm excited about a week from Thursday when there's going to be 10 new Jaguars here. I like the foundation of what they're building, and I can't wait I can't wait to move on. I think we have a new birth. That we have a rebirth. It's been a long time since there's been a rebirth. In the past, the Trent Baalke was here under the previous regime, and guys are connected to it. Doug Marrone, when he took over the job, he had been an interim under the previous regime. This is a rebirth with a brand new EVP and a brand new GM and a brand new coach. And I'm like everybody else, I can't wait to see what it brings.
9 days away from the NFL draft. And thank you, Social, and a couple of you guys on YouTube who chimed in and said, how good was that? We appreciate you guys for joining us here on Duval Rundown. I will be back tomorrow with ESPN's Jordan Reed to further break down the Jacksonville Jaguars prospects in the 2025 NFL draft. We will catch you tomorrow.